There you are, my dear little one. Come now, get cozy. Tuck yourself under the blanket, nice and warm. Grandpa's here, and I've got a tale that'll take you far from worries and right into a soft, dreamy land. The rain's tapping on the window. The world is slowing down. And tonight, I'll tell you the story of the lantern keeper of Elderwood. Now close your eyes and let Grandpa begin. Long, long ago, past the hills that rolled like old sleeping giants, there was a little village named Elderwood. You wouldn't find it on a map, no matter how hard you looked. That's because Elderwood wasn't the sort of place you stumbled upon. It was the kind of place that called to you quietly, gently, only when you needed it most. The village sat like a pearl in the valley's palm, surrounded on all sides by thick woods. These weren't ordinary trees. They were tall, older than memory, with trunks wide enough to build a house in. The people called them the Whispering Trees, not because they were scary, oh no, but because when the wind blew through their leaves at night, it sounded like the trees were telling stories to each other. Old, ancient stories about stars and storms and the time when the sky was still learning how to shine. Now the people of Elderwood were kind, slow-moving folk. They didn't worry too much, and they certainly didn't hurry. The baker still used a wood oven, and the clockmaker didn't own a single nail that wasn't passed down from his father's father. And every evening, just as the sky began to blush and the lanterns in every window flickered to light, one old man would set out from the village square carrying a single glowing lantern on a long wooden staff. His name was Tomlin. Nobody called him just Tomlin, though. To everyone in Elderwood, he was simply the lantern keeper. He wasn't the mayor, nor a priest, nor even the richest man in the village. But when Tomlin passed by, everyone nodded with deep respect. Children would stop chasing fireflies to wave at him. Old women knitting on porches would smile and say, "There he goes again, lighting the path." Each evening, Tomlin walked along the edge of the forest, gently lighting the tall lantern poles spaced along the narrow trail leading into the woods. No one really asked why. It had always been done. Generation after generation, a lantern every night. Soft glow to guide. Something. The children often whispered about it. "Maybe he's keeping the wolves away," said little Elsie once. "No, it's to show lost travelers the path," said her older brother. But the truth was, no traveler had come to Elderwood in years, and there hadn't been wolves in even longer. Still, Tomlin walked every night, lantern swinging, soft boots crunching, rain or fog, summer or snow, and as he passed the trees, he would often whisper something under his breath like a prayer or memory. No one dared follow him too far, not because they were afraid, but because there was a hush about Tomlin's path, a kind of sacredness, like stepping into a lullaby. And when he returned, always after midnight, he would sit on the same old bench in front of his cottage, puff his wooden pipe, and stare into the flame of his lantern as though it held the night's secrets. Tonight, though, something was different. The wind carried a strange scent, not danger, but change. The trees seemed to rustle with more urgency, their whispers thicker, fuller, like they had something to say but didn't know how. The flame in Tomlin's lantern flickered a little brighter, as if stirred by unseen breath. And as the sun dipped below the hills and Elderwood tucked itself into sleep, Tomlin paused at the edge of the forest and smiled, because he knew the forest was waking up again, and the story was just beginning. Tomlin stood at the forest's edge, his lantern casting a soft golden glow that flickered across the roots and stones. The village lights behind him were dimming one by one as the kind folk of Elderwood pulled quilts up to their chins and drifted into dreams. But Tomlin, he was just beginning his nightly journey. He took his first step past the stone market, an old gray slab that once served as a boundary line between the known world and the whispering woods. Beyond that point, the trees grew taller, their branches knitting together like kind old arms, as if they too wanted to listen in on the stories carried in the wind. Step by step, Tomlin lit each lantern along the path. They were wooden posts carved with small swirling patterns, symbols from a time forgotten. As the lanterns flickered to life, the path behind him seemed to hum gently, not with sound exactly, but with presence. You see, Tomlin wasn't just lighting the trail for himself. No. The lights were for others, the kind you don't see with your eyes, but sometimes feel in your bones when the night is quiet and the moon is kind. Forest spirits, old wanderers, maybe even memories themselves. Tomlin lit the path so the stories of the past could find their way home. Tonight, though, there was something else. Halfway through the trail, Tomlin paused beside an old willow tree. It had grown in the shape of a heart, its trunk split but not broken, like it had chosen to open itself to the world. Tomlin always stopped here, not just to rest, but to remember. He touched the bark gently with his weathered fingers. "This is where she heard the stars," he whispered. No one in the village knew who she was. But Tomlin remembered long ago, before his beard turned white, before the lantern staff became his walking stick, there was a girl with laughter like wind chimes and hair like dusk. Her name was Mira, and she was the only one who ever followed Tomlin into the forest without fear. She used to say the trees told her stories, that if you stood still enough, quiet enough, they'd show you pictures in the leaves and sing lullabies through the moss. Tomlin never laughed at her, not once. He listened, because even then he knew the forest wasn't just trees. It was a memory keeper, a guardian, a storyteller, but Mira had vanished. Not tragically, not fearfully. One morning she simply walked into the forest and never came back. And the strange thing was, Tomlin didn't feel grief. He felt peace, as though the forest had called her home, like it sometimes does to those it chooses. Every night since, Tomlin lit the lanterns, just in case she ever wanted to visit, just in case a memory needed a light to follow. But tonight, something changed. As he stood by the willow, a soft breeze passed, not cold, not sharp, filled with warmth, and with it came a sound, a giggle, light and faint, like someone laughing from far off, or perhaps from a dream. Tomlin's eyes twinkled as he lifted the lantern and looked down the unlit part of the trail ahead. The wind whispered through the leaves, "She's waiting." Tomlin smiled, not wide, but true, and nodded. Then, for the first time in many years, he stepped beyond the last lantern he'd ever lit, into the dark, not with fear, with faith. The forest beyond the last lantern was different, not dark, not in the way you might think. The shadows weren't cruel or sharp. They were soft, like velvet curtains gently swaying in a breeze. The air smelled of wet leaves, old wood, and a kind of sweetness that reminded Thomas of honey on warm bread. It had been many years since he stepped past the last pole. Even his boots seemed to notice, sinking slower into the moss, quieter on the stones. Everything here moved gently, deliberately, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. And Tomlin didn't light another lantern. He didn't need to, because as he walked, little glimmers began to appear, not flames, but tiny lights, like floating stars, gently bobbing above mushrooms, along vines, between the roots of old oaks. Fireflies, perhaps, floating, wiser. These were forest lights, spirits of memory, guides of the green. One by one, they blinked to life as he passed, casting a soft glow that seemed to hum with welcome. Tomlin's heart beat slow, not with tiredness, but with a calm so deep it could have been mistaken for dreaming. He followed a trail he hadn't seen in decades, and the forest welcomed him like an old friend. Trees leaned ever so slightly as he passed. Leaves rustled, not in warning, but in greeting. The path curved toward a place even the bravest villagers never dared speak of aloud. The clearing of echoes. No one knew its name anymore, not in the village. But Tomlin remembered. It was where the forest sang, and it only opened when the trees decided you were ready. He stepped through a curtain of willow branches, and there it was, a wide, quiet meadow surrounded by towering trunks. In the center stood a circle of stones, smooth and tall, like ancient sentinels, and in the middle of that circle was a pool, still as glass, dark as midnight, but above it, light, not fire, not stars, something older, a presence. Tomlin approached slowly. The forest lights gathered around the pool, forming a slow spiral in the air, as if dancing to a song no human could hear. He knelt by the water, his old knees creaking, and peered into the reflection. But what he saw was not himself. It was her. Mira. She looked just the same. Hair like dusk, eyes full of forest secrets, a soft smile like a song remembered from childhood. She didn't speak, but her reflection reached out, not with her hand, but with her feeling, a memory. And in that moment, Tomlin remembered everything. How they used to walk this very trail as children, how she was always the one brave enough to listen, how she once told him, "When I leave one day, don't follow the map. Follow the light in your chest." And now he had The pool shimmered, then rippled, and Tomlin heard it. A voice, not loud, not sharp, but deep, old, and loving. It came not from the trees, not from the sky, but from the ground. The forest was speaking. It said only one word, welcome. And Tomlin wept, not with sorrow, but with homecoming. The moment Tomlin heard the forest speak, something shifted, not around him, but within him. It was as if every heartbeat, every quiet breath he had taken over the years had led to this stillness, a silence so full. It buzzed. He knelt beside the memory pool, his old hands folded over the lantern staff. His reflection was gone now. Mirrors, too. The surface of the pool had returned to black glass, reflecting only the stars above and the forest lights that danced like fire spirits in slow, graceful circles. Welcome, the forest had said. But welcome to what? Tomlin stood slowly, his joints creaked, yes, but they didn't ache. Not here. Here, the air seemed to soothe even the years out of the bones. And then a path opened, not like before, stone or moss. This one was made of light, tiny footsteps glowing in the grass ahead, appearing one by one, as if someone invisible was walking and leaving behind soft echoes of their steps. He followed, deeper into the meadow, beyond the stones and past the sleeping trees. Birds did not sing here, insects did not chirp. But the silence was not empty. It was whole, like the hush before a lullaby. The path of light led to a hill, gentle, round, blanketed in wildflowers that shimmered faintly even in the dark. And at the top of that hill was a single tree. It stood tall and alone, silver-barked and wide-branched, its leaves glowing faintly like frost touched by dawn. It did not sway in the wind. It didn't need to. It breathed, slowly, peacefully, a kind of tree you feel before you see. Tomlin stepped closer, and something strange happened. The lantern on his staff, silent since he entered the deeper forest, suddenly dimmed, flickered, and then went out. But Tomlin didn't fear. The silver tree pulsed once like a slow heartbeat, and Tomlin understood. This was the memory tree, the oldest tree in the forest, older than the village, older than Elderwood itself. This tree didn't grow like other trees. It remembered things into being. Every leaf shimmered with stories. Every ring in its trunk held laughter, sorrow, seasons, and secrets. He placed a hand on its bark, and the world fell away, not with violence, but like falling into a dream. He saw his own past, himself, as a boy chasing Mirror through the woods. He saw the first lantern he ever lit. He saw the day Mirror disappeared, and the night he swore to keep the path lit forever. He saw nights he didn't remember anymore. Moments of small kindness, silent grief, quiet joy. Then, deeper still, he saw other memories, not his own. The first child who ever sang to the trees, the woman who planted the first light stone in the forest soil, the old stag who once died beneath the roots and became part of the forest, dreaming. And then he saw a flicker of something new, a doorway carved into the heart of the tree, hidden unless you remembered how to see it. Slowly, reverently, Tomlin stepped forward. The tree made no sound, but its bark rippled gently as if moved aside. He entered, and inside was not wood, it was stars, a sky beneath the bark, A hollow space filled with floating lights, each one a memory hovering like fireflies. He walked among them, and each one lit up as he passed. A child being hugged goodnight, a song sung by a mother long ago, a candle lit for someone missed. He was walking through remembrance itself. And at the center of the tree, there stood Mira, not older, not younger, just whole and smiling. "Hello, Tommy," she said softly, her voice like a warm blanket. "You found your way." He said nothing. He couldn't, but he stepped forward, and she took his hand. The forest did not cheer, it did not shout, but it held its breath. And then, in a long, slow sigh, it exhaled, and a new lantern lit in the heart of the tree. Inside the heart of the memory tree, time was not a line. It was a circle, a soft spiral, always turning, always returning. Tomlin stood beside Mira in the glowing chamber of stars, and the light between them wasn't just from the lantern, it came from everything they had carried, everything they had loved, everything they had lost and somehow still held dear. "You came," Mira whispered, not as a question, but as a truth that had always been waiting. "I followed the light," Tomlin said. She smiled. "You were the light." And for a long while, they simply stood together. No rush, no need for words. Just the stillness of memory wrapping around them like a warm shawl. But slowly, softly, the memory tree began to stir, not with sound or movement, but with feeling. A quiet tug, like a sleeping child gently pulling on a parent's sleeve. The lights in the chamber pulsed. One by one, they began to drift closer to Tomlin, circling around him, weaving through his beard, brushing against his cheeks like curious butterflies. "What are they?" he asked. "Memories that are ready," Mira said. "They've been waiting for someone to carry them again." Tomlin didn't understand at first, but then one of the lights stopped right in front of him. It shimmered, and suddenly he saw a young girl, maybe 7 or 8, alone in a cold village far to the north, holding a small broken lantern to her chest, whispering, "I just want someone to find me." The vision faded. Another light. A father weeping beneath a willow tree, clutching a letter he was too late to deliver. Another, an old woman lighting a candle every night for 50 years, waiting for her sister to come home from the sea. Each light held a story that had no ending, a memory with no place to rest. And now they were choosing him. "But I'm just a lantern keeper," Tomlin said softly. "No," Mira replied, stepping closer. "You're the rememberer, the one who never let the light go out." And in that moment, Tomlin understood. The lantern he had carried all his life. It wasn't just for Elderwood. It wasn't just for Mira. It was a vessel, a flame of remembrance meant to carry the forgotten safely through the dark. Mira lifted the staff in his hand. The lantern at its top glowed once more, brighter than ever before, but the flame inside had changed. It no longer flickered orange or gold. It shimmered silver blue, like moonlight on snow, or the hush of starlight before dawn. Each light from the memory chamber floated gently into the lantern one by one, until the flame inside danced with thousands of stories. Tomlin felt no burden, only purpose. Mira touched his chest, right over his heart. "You'll go back," she said, "not to forget, but to remember, for those who can." Tomlin looked into her eyes. "And you?" "I'll be here," she said with a smile that carried lifetimes. "In the light, in the roots, in the hush of trees, whenever you need me." The forest pulsed once more. The chamber of stars began to dim, not with sadness, but with peace. And when Tomlin stepped out from the tree, the forest bowed. The wind hushed, and the path home lit itself. Tomlin stepped out from the memory tree not as the same man who had entered. He was no longer just the keeper of Elderwood's lanterns. He had become something more, a bearer of forgotten voices, a walker between worlds. The silver blue flame in his lantern didn't burn. It glowed like hope, patiently waiting in the dark. The forest greeted him. Every tree, every root, every quiet stone remembered his name now, and not just the name the village had given it, Tomlin the Lantern Keeper, but the one the forest had always known, Tomlin the Rememberer. The soft moss welcomed his footsteps. The firefly lights hovered above him like a slow, quiet crowd. The wind, oh, the wind, it no longer whispered warnings. It sang. But the path home was not the same as before. It didn't follow the usual trail of lantern poles and carved stones. No, this time the forest carved a new path, one just for him. A silver thread of light on the ground winding like a stream, leading him gently back toward Elderwood. He followed it, his staff in hand, each step going with quiet strength. And as he walked, strange and wonderful things began to happen. He passed a withered tree stump, and the silver flame flickered. The stump pulsed softly, and from its center a single green sprout unfurled, glowing with beauty. He passed a fallen bird, its feathers soaked by the rain, and the lantern glowed gently. The bird stirred, blinked, and flew into the canopy, trailing a shimmer like dawn behind it. The forest itself responded to his presence now, not out of fear, but reverence. And then the village lights appeared in the distance. He paused at the stone boundary marker, the old gray slab that once marked the end of the world and the beginning of the wild. He placed a hand on it gently. The stone, cold and old, pulsed once, as if saying, "You made it home." Elderwood was quiet, as it always was at this hour. Roofs glistened with rain. Chimneys puffed out tired wisps of smoke. The cobblestones were slick, and even the dogs slept without stirring. But something had changed. As Tomlin entered the village, the silver blue flame illuminated more than just his path. Windows began to glow, not from candles, from memory. One by one, people stirred in their sleep. Soft sighs, murmurs, as though dreams had grown warmer. A girl smiled in her sleep and whispered her grandmother's name. A man gripped his pillow and finally forgave his father. A baby stopped crying and laughed. Tomlin passed the bakery, and its ivy-covered wall pulsed faintly. A memory lingered there of a boy who once gave his last piece of bread to a hungry squirrel. He passed the well, where two children once made a secret wish their mother would heal. He passed the empty house by the mill, the one no one ever spoke of, and the flame paused, glowed, and in the silence A long-lost lullaby filled the air just for a moment. Tomlin walked until he reached the old bench by the chapel, the one he always sat on at the end of his round. He sat, took a deep breath, and for the first time in many years, he wept, not from sorrow, but from fullness. The memories in his lantern weren't heavy. They were home. Each one was a light someone had left behind, waiting to be seen again. And Tomlin, he was their bearer. The village of Elderwood began to change. Not suddenly, not with shouts or trumpets, but slowly, gently, like how morning dew gathers on leaves, or how a mother's arm can warm a cold room. Ever since Tomlin returned from the memory tree, the air itself felt softer. Dreams lasted longer. People awoke feeling like something they had forgotten had been quietly returning. But the forest was not done with him yet. It was a week after his return when the fog came. It rolled in one evening, not from the sea, but from the forest itself. Not heavy or harsh, but light and curious, like 1,000 tiny spirits sneaking into the village, playful and whispering. The villagers noticed. They lit extra candles, closed windows, held their children a little closer. Tomlin, though, sat on his bench by the chapel, his lantern glowing softly in the mist. He could hear the fog speak, not with words, but in feeling. It wasn't danger, it was calm. So he stood, as he always did, and followed, down the stone path, past the well, beyond the baker, into the trees. The fog thickened, but it didn't confuse him. The lantern's silver blue light cut through the mist like moonlight on water. And then he heard laughter. Children, software echoing, familiar, but not from this time. He followed the sound until he came to a clearing he had never seen before. And there, in the middle of the clearing, stood 5 children, not ghostly, not frightening, just children. But they shimmered faintly like reflections in a dream. Each one held a small object, a toy, a scarf, a wooden spoon, a flower. They looked at Tomlin with wide, wondering eyes. He knew immediately what they were. Forgotten, not abandoned, not lost, just never remembered properly. Some had lived long ago. Others were dreams that had never fully formed. And one, Tomlin could feel it, wasn't even from Elderwood, maybe not even from this world. They weren't sad. They were waiting. Tomlin knelt, lowering the lantern toward them. One by one, the children approached. The first, a boy with a wooden whistle, placed it gently at the base of the lantern. The flame flickered, then swallowed the memory whole. A faint tune echoed in the air, like a lullaby caught on wind. The second, a girl with golden braids, offered a daisy made of frost. The lantern warmed it, turned it to life, and the whole clearing smelled of spring for a moment. The third, fourth, and fifth followed. Each memory entered the lantern not with sadness, but with joy. And when the last child stepped back, Tomlin finally spoke. "Would you like me to remember you?" The children didn't answer. They only smiled. And with a soft breath, they faded, becoming mist once more, drifting up into the trees, into the stars, into the memory of the world. Tomlin stood silently for a long time. Then he turned, lantern in hand, and walked back toward Elderwood. But the fog didn't follow him this time. stayed behind, not lost, not wandering, just remembered. Above him, the clouds parted just enough to show a slice of moonlight, and in that soft light, the forest beyond the village shimmered faintly, watching, waiting, remembering. He looked down at the lantern in his hand, now glowing as gently as a heartbeat, and he whispered, "I'll keep walking. I'll keep remembering. I promise." The silver flame pulsed once, and from the depths of the forest, a single word echoed back. "Thank you." The village of Elderwood began to change. Not suddenly, not with shouts or trumpets, but slowly, gently, like how morning dew gathers on leaves or how a mother's hum can warm a cold room. Ever since Tomlin returned from the memory tree, the air itself felt softer. Dreams lasted longer. People awoke feeling like something they had forgotten had been quietly returned. But the forest was not done with him yet. It was a week after his return when the fog came. It rolled in one evening, not from the sea, but from the forest itself. Not heavy or harsh, but light and curious, like 1,000 tiny spirits sneaking into the village, playfully whispering. The villagers noticed. They lit extra candles, closed windows, held their children a little closer. Tomlin, though, sat on his bench by the chapel, his lantern glowing softly in the mist. He could hear the fog speak, not with words, but with feeling. It wasn't danger, it was calling. So he stood, as he always did, and followed, down the stone paths, past the well, beyond the bakery, into the trees. The fog thickened, but it didn't confuse him. The lantern's silver blue light cut through the mist like moonlight on water. And then he heard laughter. Children, software echoing, familiar, but not from this time. He followed the sound until he came to a clearing he had never seen before. And there, in the middle of the clearing, stood 5 children. Not ghostly, not frightening, just children. But they shimmered faintly like reflections in a dream. Each one held a small object, a toy, a scarf, a wooden spoon, a flower. They looked at Tomlin with wide, wondering eyes. He knew immediately what they were. Forgotten, not abandoned, not lost. Just never remembered properly. Some had lived long ago. Others were dreams that had never fully formed. And one, Tomlin could feel it, wasn't even from Elderwood, maybe not even from this world. They weren't sad. They were waiting. Tomlin knelt, lowering the lantern toward them. One by one, the children approached. The first, a boy with a wooden whistle, placed it gently at the base of the lantern. The flame flickered, then swallowed the memory whole. A faint tune echoed in the air, like a lullaby caught on wind. The second, a girl with golden braids, offered a daisy made of frost. The lantern warmed it, turned it to light, and the whole clearing smelled of spring for a moment. The third, fourth, and fifth followed. Each memory entered the lantern not with sadness, but with joy. And when the last child stepped back, Tomlin finally spoke. "Would you like me to remember you?" The children didn't answer. They only smiled. And with a soft breath, they faded, becoming mist once more, drifting up into the trees into the stars, into the memory of the world. Tomlin stood silently for a long time. Then he turned, lantern in hand, and walked back toward Elderwood. But the fog didn't follow him this time. It stayed behind. Not lost, not wandering, just remembered. The days passed gently in Elderwood like pages in a book too soft to tear. Tomlin still made his nightly rounds, staff in hand, silver blue lantern lighting his path, and every evening the people of the village left small objects outside their homes. A ribbon, button, a poem scribbled on old parchment, not offerings, but memories gently placed, hoping to be carried. Tomlin never questioned them. He simply took what was left, held it to the flame, and watched the light absorb it with warmth. But one night, the lantern pulsed in a strange rhythm. 3 soft flickers, then one long pause. It had never done that before. He tilted its head, listening, and the lantern flickered again as if pointing. Tomlin turned his gaze, and there, at the edge of Elderwood, where the trees grew crooked and quiet, stood a house no one ever spoke of. It had no chimney, no mailbox, no windows, and no door. Just 4 walls, weathered and leaning, nestled in a bed of moss and silence. The village children called it the house that forgot how to open. Some said it was cursed. Others said it was waiting for something. Tomlin had passed it hundreds of times, but tonight the lantern called him to it. He approached slowly, the flame growing brighter with every step. When he reached the wall, the light shimmered like water. The wood wasn't just old, it was sealed shut by something more than time, not locked, lonely. Tomlin placed a hand on the wall and whispered, "I'm here." The lantern flared, and then a crack. A long groaning sound echoed through the trees as the wall shifted, not with violence, but relief, like something exhaling after centuries of holding its breath. A doorway appeared, no handle, no hinges, just space where space hadn't been. Tomlin stepped inside. It was dark, but not cold. Dust danced in the lantern light. The room was empty, yet not forgotten. The floor creaked with familiarity. On one wall, faint outlines of paintings long faded. On another, a rocking chair faced nothing but a bare patch of wood. And in the center, a rug, worn, stitched, and full of memory. As he stepped closer, the lantern glowed warmer. Then the rug pulsed. It was a memory, but one too heavy to come forth on its own. Tomlin knelt beside it and gently placed the lantern on top. The flame reached downward, and suddenly a vision filled the room. A woman, alone, rocking slowly, her face hidden by time, but her presence as clear as moonlight. She hummed a lullaby, not for a child, but for a husband long gone, for a life that had faded, for a world that had gone on without remembering her. The house had closed itself off, not from spite, but from sorrow. It had buried its story too deep. Until now, the flame lifted the memory gently, like a mother carrying a sleeping child. It didn't burn it away. It honored it. The rocking chair creaked once more, then went still, and the house sighed. The doorway opened wider, and the night breeze flowed in for the first time in centuries. Tomlin stood, and behind him, where there had been only dust and silence, a soft voice whispered, thing. The knocking. He walked out. The door stayed open behind him. And the lantern? It glowed just a little warmer than before. After the night of the house with no door, Elderwood grew quieter, but not in a way that felt empty. No, it was the quiet of peace, of stilled water, of breath between words. The villagers no longer feared the strange or forgotten. They would watch Tomlin pass and nod in respect, their eyes soft with understanding. Children would sit by the edge of the woods, hoping to see the flicker of his silver-blue flame. Some even claimed they heard the lantern singing on certain nights, though none could say the tune. But Tomlin knew it was the forest humming in harmony. Still, the flame had not rested. It pulsed with a steady rhythm, gentle but certain, like a heartbeat. It was leading him somewhere. One night, the lantern's light turned downward, not toward the forest or sky, but toward the ground, toward the roots, toward the deep. Tomlin followed. He left the village quietly just past midnight, boots crunching on damp leaves. The lantern bobbed gently, casting a silver halo on the forest floor. He came to the elder tree, not the memory tree, but its twin, older and wider, growing out of a stone hill with bark like cracked leather and branches that scraped the stars. At its base, a hollow, not there the day before. It wasn't a cave exactly, more like a passage, down, spiraled, alive. Tomlin hesitated, then stepped in. The roots closed behind him, not to trap him, but to protect what was inside. He descended slowly. The lantern lit the way. The deeper he went, the quieter the world became. Even the sound of his breath seemed to fade. The walls were covered in bark and moss, but woven with tiny symbols, ancient letters glowing faintly with memory. And then he heard it, a bell. Faint, distant, and impossibly old. Not a church bell, not a warning bell, a mourning bell. It rang once every few minutes, so slowly that between tolls it felt like time itself forgot how to move. The tunnel opened at last into a vast underground chamber. Tree roots crisscrossed the ceiling like a sleeping creature's ribs, and in the center stood a stone pillar. On it sat a small iron bell, cracked, rusted, but humming softly with song. Tomlin approached. The lantern paused. He reached out and touched the bell, and the chamber remembered. Visions came, not sharp, but soft, like memories glimpsed through tears. A village, not Elderwood, consumed by fire. A mother carrying a child too late to save. A soldier whispering apologies to a tree before vanishing into the mist. So many voices, so much grief buried under soil and time. The bell had been their last prayer, a sound meant to echo long after all other sounds had died, and no one had answered. Until now. Tomlin held the lantern to the bell. The flame turned quiet and steady, and then it poured into the bell like water into stone. The crack in the bell glowed. The rust fell away. The metal turned silver blue. The bell rang once more, but this time it was different. It did not cry out in sorrow. It sang in remembrance. Every root in the chamber shimmered with memory. Every hidden name was spoken again by the flame. The bell was no longer a grave. It had become a beacon. Tomlin stepped back. The bell glowed in the dark, a heart beating beneath the forest. He turned. walked back through the tunnel, and when he emerged, the stars above Elderwood were shining brighter than they had in 100 years. Tomlin stood at the edge of the village one evening, just before the stars had gathered. The bell beneath the root still rang now and then, softly, gently, a reminder that not all things lost are gone. Elderwood had changed. Its people had grown quieter, kinder. Some days they would place 2 memories by their door instead of one. One to be remembered and one to be let go. But the lantern in Tomlin's hand had grown brighter, too bright. It no longer flickered. It flowed like a stream made of starlight and stars. It had gathered more than just forgotten toys or faded lullabies. It had gathered the weight of a world that needed to remember itself, and the forest had grown still, as if waiting. That night, as he stepped into the trees, he knew this would be the final walk, the last memory. He didn't follow the old trails. The lantern led him upward, past the memory tree, past the elder tree, past the stone well where children once made wishes, higher and higher, until he reached the cliff where the sky first kissed the forest. There, where no paths led, stood a gate, old, silent, covered in moss, but not forgotten. The lantern flared. The gate opened. Beyond it, there was no forest, no stars, only light, not blinding, not burning, just warm, like a mother's hug, like the moment between the last word of a lullaby and the first breath of sleep. A voice spoke, not from the sky or the ground, but from within. "You have carried enough, Tomlin." He said nothing. He only looked at the lantern in his hands. It pulsed one last time. Then slowly, gently, it rose from his palms, lifted by unseen wind, and floated into the great light beyond the gate. As it passed through, a shiver moved through the air. Every tree in Elderwood sighed, every stone warmed, every forgotten thing remembered. Tomlin? He smiled. Then he sat beneath the gate and closed his eyes, not from weariness, but from peace. Above him, the light from the lantern rose into the sky and turned into a new star, a silver blue star, one that would never fade. There now, little one, it's time to sleep. Let the rain sing you to rest. Let the lantern glow in your dreams, and know that Grandpa's voice will always be